Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions 7 days a week. Let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Bill, what do we have?
First one comes from David Brady in New York City, and David wonders, what and how does the panel name or label sound and destinations on your video routers?
Go ahead, Mickey.
My go-to with that, not only with video routers, but also, say, with analog patch base and also with other AV over IP protocols, like Dante, I like labeling it by the actual device and the channel of that device. Because there are some people that name things by its purpose or its use case, but a purpose or a use case for a specific device may change over time. Or if, say, a facility is used for different shows, they may be using that same display for a totally different use case from another show that's using the same studio or infrastructure. So I like labeling it by the device itself and the channel of that device.
Next question.
Next question comes to us from Funsak Georgi in Dharamsala, I think, but I don't remember. It isn't there. Hi, panelists. We're planning to build a vMix box with Decklink Quad 2. We'll be using 6 cameras and 4 will be used for instant replays with XKey, the XKey-XK12Jog and Shuttle. Can I do it cheaper with 4 input Decklinks and a little less powerful computer? Please advise.
Good, Mickey.
2 4-channel video interface cards like Decklinks would end up costing you more than a single 8-channel one. And you would also need to have a motherboard that has enough PCI slots at the number of PCI lanes that are required by 2 cards instead of just 1. So it would be a lot easier and simpler and also cheaper to just go with a single 8-channel card. In terms of the GPU and CPU of the computer itself, do not cheap out on this. Get what you need times 2 in terms of the performance. Take a look at the reference systems that have been created by vMix themselves. They have reference systems that you can look at in terms of what GPU you would want to use, what the motherboard you may want to use, what CPU. And I also know that they posted about a month and a half ago that they are working on new reference systems to update the ones they have. I think the ones they have there in their website have been around for like 2 or 3 years now, so they're working on updating that. So keep posted on those updates. They have, I think it's a either weekly or monthly show about vMix that they stream live on YouTube. So take a look at that. And also check out the vMix forums, ask around, see what people are looking at. Oh, another good resource in terms of CPU or computer hardware to use for streaming systems, including vMix, is Puget Systems. Puget tests a lot of variations or configurations of hardware based on specific software that people use. And take a look at their articles that they've posted about vMix. Those are really, really good. Puget, their articles are outstanding.
Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington. What is a virtual sound check and how would you use it? And he's got a link there to Soundcheck, which has an article called What is a Virtual Sound Check?
Good, Jeff.
I'll let some of the other folks talk about the one specifically in this link, but generally speaking, and I'll show you some others, this is more and more companies are offering this kind of thing. And I'll show you, for instance, Riverside, the double-ended recording platform. They offer 2 different versions of this, and I like it in concept, which is they let you send these links, in this case, for example, to an upcoming guest. And even if you plan on doing a sound check or a tech check with them, you can send this as a baseline ahead of time. Now, it's not going to be perfect, but these, for example, these 2 different versions, and I'll run this one, of course, it'll tell me it'll fail, and this is a good thing. You see it shows on video that this browser that I'm running in, it is not supported. So it checks some of the baselines, are you using the right browser? Can I even see that you have a microphone and that we hear something? Do you have a good enough and unstable internet connection, so it's going to do some of these tests that can be automated. So at least these baseline checklist items can be resolved before it's time to bring other humans in. So now the caveat is you can send it to them. You can't make them do it. So that's the trick.
Go, Nikki.
Yeah, virtual sound check is a technique used in usually in live sound, specifically when it comes to music productions, wherein this is commonly done by, like, say, touring bands, wherein they would record a show, say from a previous day or a previous concert in another city, multi-track record that, and while they're setting up for the next show, they would play that multi-track recording so that the engineers, front of house engineer, monitor engineer, can rough in a mix even before the artists are on stage for sound check, so that they can already get into the ballpark of what they would want the mix to sound in this new venue, because every venue sounds different. So, and also the conditions may be different. This would only work, of course, if, say, you're using the exact same backline, the exact same microphones. You have a sound chain that has the same sonic qualities, so that whatever you're dialing in during that virtual sound check would actually be a good facsimile to what the sound will actually be like coming from the mics when your artists are on stage during their real sound check.
Good, Chris?
Yeah, so Mickey very much hit that right on the head. This is mainly an approach for live touring acts, and the whole idea here is that you're creating a baseline, okay? Because what you want is a very, very consistent environment that is exactly the same in every room. And the only thing that's changing is the room itself. You get the room dialed in, and then you should be roughly back to where you are. So the whole idea of a virtual sound check is you're touring with your own microphones, with your own everything. And every cable, everything is being reused for every show. So that gives you an actual realistic playback. Because when you're listening back in a room and you're making tweaks on a bass, let's say, that bass amp is going to be the same bass amp at the real showtime, and you're going to be using the same microphones and the same settings. So the way this is typically done, actually the only way it's done really, is that this is multi-tracked live at a concert, and then the following show, all you're doing is you're piping that multi-track back in through the console, and you're just messing with the recording in real time. And that's all that it is. But it allows you to really, really get focused and just kind of foresee any issues in the room before you have the whole band up. Because these, the bigger scale these concerts go, the more moving parts, and it gets really, really complicated in certain aspects. And so what you want to do is be able to just make use of time. That's what this is all about, is just being efficient with time and making sure that when the band is up, you're not, we didn't realize this thing wasn't working that we could have figured out before. That's why people do the virtual sound checks.
That's how you end up not being the engineer for very long. Leading up that very long is like having the band stand there, wait while you try to work something out that could have been handled before. That's not usually a good
After
look.
30 seconds, the show is dead. The recording session is dead. Yeah, artists, when they're getting up and they want to play and they want to do their thing, it is so important for them to be able to just go and play. The second that you're holding that stuff back, it's like just really 2 minutes of stuff not working in a recording session. Just book another day. Come back tomorrow. Let's start over. Yeah,
I think taking care of talent is something a lot of people don't think about, whether it's a concert or an event or something else. Yeah. Having all of that be really a smooth experience is so important, because they're in a mental space, and they're either in a good space or a bad space. They're either tired or they're frustrated or they're excited or they're into the groove. But when you see artists say, well, I was just really, present that day, or this was a good day for me, that oftentimes has something to do with them, but it has a lot to do with all the people around them that create kind of a bubble that allow them to be in the space that they need to be in to perform in front of sometimes hundreds or thousands of people. Absolutely.
It's philosophically, you are what your crew is.
Yeah.
Right. And if they're a bunch of maniacs who can't get the job done, like you're not going to have a good time. This is never going to be efficient, So very much correct.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Jack Cannon in Phoenix, Arizona. Jack wonders, any product recommendations for hanging curtains from a drop ceiling? I need to black out a 30-foot wall of windows and don't want to keep setting up C-stands with negative fill.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, so the first thing about drop ceilings, you can see I have one. One of my favorite things for drop ceilings are actual drop ceiling tiles. There's a place, I believe it's the Foam Factory in Michigan, and they just ship it out to you. It's really affordable, and it's already cut out for ceiling tiles, so there's a bunch of different color choices and things like that. I would definitely start with something like that because your actual ceiling is a massive issue in acoustics. Frequently, it's the worst part, actually, because everything is going up, and it's just kind of hovering around up in the ceiling and gets gross. The thing I would be cognizant of is that your like the track for ceiling is like it's not made for weight. So it's hard with curtains and things like that. You want things that are going to be thicker and that are going to be heavier. So that's not like a realistic thing to hang from. I would say definitely stands and just doing that. I mean, if that's the only option, you may have to just stick to that. I don't know if it's possible to get a track installed at the windows where you can have an opening and closing curtain. That seems like the most logical thing for me. Really, if you go up beyond the actual panels for the drop ceiling, there's got to be some kind of like joist or wood or some kind of mountable aspect up above that. So I would see if maybe you know have holes on either side just so something sturdy can be suspended down, and do a curtain rod or something like that can be opened or closed for whatever your environment. You know, you don't want to lose the windows permanently. That's great. So
Yeah, go, Bill.
I just want to double down on Chris's suggestion that pay attention to what's up there. If you're going to work with a drop ceiling, you have to look at it because in my experience, there's all sorts of levels of expertise in hanging drop ceilings. I've seen a lot of them where it just could hold almost no weight at all. Literally, you put one small fixture and it's going to pull on the wires and create things. I've been a big fan of auto poles, and I'm going to do this very quickly because the ceiling fan is running right now. That's what's above me right now. And you can see a bunch of auto poles that I use to eliminate the need for going into this ceiling. Now, this ceiling is not a drop ceiling. It's a textured standard ceiling. But the point is, I didn't want to mar this, and that's sometimes an issue if you're in a rental or something that you can't get a hold of. The other problem is just the amount of weight that we are continually hanging up. You can see I have actually quite a few devices hanging from that, both lights, cameras, and other things. So I needed something that I was sure would hold the weight. And I always err on the side of being extra careful about anything that I'm going to put above anyone's heads. My client table is behind me, not too far underneath that. So the risk of a fixture coming loose or the pipe dropping is not acceptable. So be careful with hanging things in a ceiling area.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, Jack mentions in chat that it will be a recurring show that they'll be producing in here, or a recurring shoot that they would be producing in the space. So I definitely look into permanently installing some sort of pipe and drape system, and do not hang this directly on the drop ceiling. Those do not support much weight.
So I'll argue just a little bit that one part of my growth as a producer, what we hung a lot of things from drop ceilings just because we were working in a lot of corporate environments, and we got very good at understanding what we could and couldn't do in those drop ceilings. The big thing that we paid attention to is where you're looking for where they're being mounted here. So this is where the drop ceiling there's a wire hanging. The big thing is that, and this is what we used with scissor clips. So these scissor clips would just scissor right onto these. We just wouldn't get very far away from one of these, one of the wires hanging down. Now, in some cases, you don't see very many of them, as Chris and Mickey and Bill had talked about. You don't see very many of them. In a lot of cases, especially in California, because of the codes that are required, they're everywhere. Like it's every like 2.5 feet. There's one that's there. So you end up with a lot of them, and when you see that, you just pop your head up. And I actually have I have it right here. I have one of those little like spy things with a wire, and so I have it in my kit all the time. And this is the I had the monitor here, the wires outside, because I was going through my my skimmer. I'm trying to find a clog, so I got 50 feet into the skimmer. But this little screen here, and I have this little thing, and I'll just go up and I'll just like look around and see what's going on up there to see what I'm looking at. And so what the big thing is that where that drop ceiling is the stiffest is usually right against the wall, because it's attached to the wall all the way around. So you can actually drop pins all the way down that if you're trying to do something temporary. I definitely agree that a permanent solution is the best, and you're going to find the best railing systems, in my opinion, are from Rose Brand, or you can get them through Rose Brand. So we've bought whole systems that are going to allow us to install it to the wall, to open and close it. Those are things. But if you can't do that, we've worked in a lot of corporate environments where I've got a bag of scissor clips and I put up 4x4 Kinoflows, all kinds of other stuff, and just hang an array of things over there. But I do that knowing where all those things go. Like I know where those wires are. I know where I can clip into it. And I'm always going, like, you'll always see me pulling like this just to watch the ceiling. Like, is it bending or not? Once you get near the center of the ceiling, you can't really go down that path. But you can, again, it really depends on where you are. In California, again, because of the codes that we have around it, it's very the infrastructure is very deep. And so you can usually get away with that kind of thing. But we did it for, I don't know, it was like, there was a mode of like 3 or 4 years that everything I did was drop ceilings. And I've never had a problem, like literally never had a problem with the drop ceilings, and put stuff up there. I look at it and I go, that should not work, because it's like 4x4 Kinoflows with some Divas and some other little bits and pieces. They're all hanging from the drop ceiling and nothing's happening. So we worry about it in our head. I find that it's not necessarily as dangerous as it sounds, but you do have to pay attention to where it's being addressed. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, what sort of wireless camera systems would you use in a sports market? Would you use Vislink units like we use at NAB, or would you use another brand?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, Vislink is certainly the vendor that you'll see in most places globally. There's another vendor that's popular in North America, or specifically the United States, called 3G Media. But I don't see them much elsewhere aside from articles that I've read of productions in the U.S. But globally, Vislink is certainly the leader.
Yeah, we've worked with 3G, and 3G is you don't really rent their gear, you rent their service. You hire them as a service, and so they manage a lot of the wireless for Indy, NASCAR. Really, really. So when I have really complicated, like this is, and I think I've talked about an example where we needed to have a two-way internet connection with an Indy car going at 150 miles an hour through Sonoma Raceway. And we hire 3G to come in and do that. So 3G comes in and they build the mesh network for us, and then deliver back to us the video signals to make that actually work. So they don't rent things. They provide a service that you're going to get. Vislink you can buy, rent, and those are very high. Lynx is another one. Those are all on the kind of the higher end version of these wireless. What we see the most often for the smaller productions is generally Teradek and DJI. And DJI has been rolling up very quickly. They're relatively inexpensive. They're very flexible. The monitors are all built in. They're interacting with the Ronin 4Gs and other things like that. And so we see the DJIs more and more coming in. I will say that the Teradek goes through walls better than the DJI. So the DJI works really well because DJI built their wireless around drones. If you get them out in the open, they will cover an incredible amount of space, but they do not deal with rebar and other things like that as well as a Teradek will. So in the lower cost versions of those things, which both of those are very popular, that we've done a lot of work with both the Teradek Rangers as well as the DJI tools, and the Rangers are stunningly good, for almost everything we've done. And we've used bolts in pretty complicated places, but I wouldn't use the bolts for anything that was important to me. I would go to the Rangers pretty quickly. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer in VR Florida up next. How do beamforming mics distinguish actual voice from room reflections?
Go ahead, Chris.
All right. I'm assuming that you're talking about just like how our really, really tight response shotgun mics operating, right? These microphones, the more directional they get, the more it's a laser beam. right? So it's just a really, really finely aimable pickup response, right? But it's not correcting anything else in the room. So this is, I think a lot of people get really confused by just acoustics and there's so many crutches that are offered in tech now. It's like, oh, do this thing, and it's a feedback suppressor, and it's a blah, 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 and it's, whatever the thing is. Learn your frequencies if you want to fix feedback. That's the thing that actually lets you do this stuff, and learn to hear acoustics. If you're out in a field with any of these kinds of microphones, they're usually a few grand. So like if you're already at that point, you should really know how this stuff operates and interacts with the environment around you. I've been in some really squirrely, crazy environments, and I have a lot of fun working in those types of situations because you have to get so out of your head and just be aware to, if you dumb everything down and you just listen to what is actually happening, you can usually come up with pretty thoughtful solutions for that. So I would say, like, if you're in a place with really, really bad acoustics, okay, the reason that they're bad acoustics is you say something and it's reflecting everywhere, right? And it's just swirling and moving around. The more you tune your room, treat your room, the more directional, like for me, the sound is really coming from my speakers. It's not coming from anywhere else, right? And using a microphone is the same thing. Your job is to get as close to the source, obviously if there's cameras involved, without ruining shots, anything like that. But if there's serious issues, if you're in a room with lots of reflection, those reflections are still there, right? You're just maybe not looking at the whole scope, and you can get a little bit more of a spotlight on something. But really, this is where, like, where it baffles and things like that. Obviously, in a lot of situations, you can't use that stuff because aesthetically it just doesn't fit the situation. But there's thoughtful ways to kind of look at acoustics when you go in, so you can kind of just mitigate some of these issues. But yeah, I mean, these mics, from what I see your question, it's very, very much a spotlight on the source.
Go ahead, Mickey.
The beamforming mics don't actually do the beamforming at the microphone end itself. It's just an array of microphones that run through a processor that analyzes the signals from the multiple microphones in the array and compares them in terms of timing, which microphone is receiving the signal or the physical sound waves first, and also in terms of frequency response. And based off of that information, it decides which ones of the microphone in that array is the better one to send out to its output, and whichever destination it may need to go. So the microphones actually aren't doing anything actively. It's the processing after the fact that turns them into a beam-forming microphone. But yeah, I have to agree with Chris. Like, these beam-forming microphone arrays, you often find them in conference rooms where there's no predictability where people will be at, and they typically mount it on the ceiling, so it's quite distant from the actual people that are speaking. So when it does the comparison and picking between the multiple microphones in that array, it's picking between which of these really bad sounding distant microphones is the best. So if there is a possibility of using just better microphone systems where you actually get better signal to noise ratio, and get the microphones closer to the people that are actually speaking, that would certainly be better than just throwing an array in the ceiling and calling it a day.
Next question.
Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri. I'm looking for a good quality wired keyboard and mouse. I'm not a gamer, but is that the route I need to go? Hopefully, it'll be under $200 US for the pair.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, unfortunately, no real additional information about what you want to use it for, aside from not for games. So, nor which platform are you on, Windows or Mac. So I'm going to go out on a limb and just give maybe a bit of a more general advice, at least for Mac users, which is I cannot recommend more highly the good old standard wired Mac keyboard, full size with the numeric keypad, but there's a reason, which is all the accessories. There you go. Chris has one, all the accessories. In fact, I was just recommending this to a client who asked, how do you get good on Adobe Premiere? How do you get good on Photoshop? And I said, a million companies on Amazon sell these little silicone overlays. And now you can get stickers to put on the keys, but the silicone overlays are great because you can have different ones and you don't have to use them for your normal work. But if you're going to sit down and do a session in Photoshop, you take out the $10 overlay with all the Photoshop buttons and you put it on there. And now you have all the buttons for Photoshop. And then you do the same for any other app. And you can have them made with whatever you want on it, custom. But of course, they only do it for certain keyboards. And that is one keyboard that everyone makes overlays for. So that's just one tip, and I'll leave others to talk about mice, because I'm one of the crazy people that seem to still love the Magic Mouse, because I do jog and shuttle basically right on the mouse.
Good, Chris?
All right. Yeah, I very much agree with Jeff. For me, I'm a huge fan of Apple stuff. I love the tactile experience of Apple, and to me, it feels the best. And this is a thing that my hands are on this all day long. Right, this is my real tactile. Just moves through Pro Tools or whatever I'm doing. So I want this stuff to actually be comfortable, right? It's like if you're an Uber driver, get a nice car, and so you're comfortable all day, right? So I really like the Apple stuff. For me, for mouse and all that, I use Kensington trackball, and then I also use just an Apple trackpad. And I really love, because I'm working for 12 hours at a time, just here clickety clicking away. It's really, really helpful to actually have some different things for me, just for like carpal tunnel and stuff. It really works well. So, and yes, very much what Jeff said. You can get template, essentially like soft key shortcut printout silicon covers for any program you're using that will actually show you shortcuts in that application. So.
Yeah, so I use a Newfie. I got hooked on these. I had an EVS operator come in with them. I think I've told the story before. Unwrapped this little keyboard, and I was like, "Can I try that?" And I clicked on it. I have a bad habit of buying keyboards, and I've kind of landed on Newfies. They have lots of different switches, so you can decide. I started with red switches. I've kind of moved to moss. The moss switches are a little softer. Unfortunately, I have one. My older one is the one I use here, and then my newer one is which one my son uses, has the moss ones, which I like his keyboard better. There's a wide variety of Newfies here. These are. I have the Halos. So I have a Halo 96 and I have a Halo 75. The only difference between them is the numeric keyboard. So the one I have in my office is a 96, and the one that I have that I travel around with, and the one my son uses is a 75. So those are the ones that I use. As you can see, there's a lot of options, a lot of colors, a lot of switches that are all available. So it's flexible enough as a system that I'm probably not going to go anywhere for a while. And then what I use for my mouse is a Deft Pro. It's a wireless. By the way, the Newfie is wired. It has its own wireless transmitter that can click into USB, and it does Bluetooth. So all three of them, you just pull a switch, decide which one you want to talk to, which is kind of cool because you can connect it via Bluetooth to one computer and via wire to another computer, so you can switch between the computers just by doing that as well. This Deft Pro has got a ton of buttons on it that I use. So it is a trackball. It gives me a bunch of buttons, and it's completely wireless. So, and a lot of that had to do with how little space I have on my desk, because I've got all these monitors and all kinds of other things. Having a mouse wasn't practical. Next question.
Chuck Hodges in Tuolumne, California is up next. How do the new Zoom tools overcome the show's frequent complaint against interaction and audience graphic tools like Slido needing to use a separate app to use or control it? Slido can be fully web-based too, but this seems to need more work.
I think the problem with Slido is it tends to be a little goofy. It just feels very corporate, and I don't think they're going to be able to get out of the feeling very corporate, and they're trying to make it fun. And when I've only seen it a couple times, and I find Slido to be a little cringy. So that's the problem with it, and also that it's owned by a company that doesn't really care about expanding. I mean, this is really about supporting WebEx events. So in Cisco style events, they bought Slido to support their own stuff and to be part of their bigger package. They're not trying to be an independent group that manages other things. And so Slido is kind of a dead end for most people because of that. The Zoom tools, I think that what we're seeing now is with the new the Zoom graphics tools that are coming out, their ability to grab onto all the data inside a Zoom and then be able to build however you want it to look. So being able to grab the chat functions, of course Q&A, but there's also there's all kinds of speaker attribution, translations, captions. All these things can be controlled now. It is still a separate app. It's not totally built in, but I don't think that that's necessarily an issue. And the big thing is that you really have the way that graphics tool has been built is you can use HTML, CSS, all of those things to control how you want to do it. So if you have a web designer, it's all you need to figure out what it's going to look like. And the way that the pasting works allows you to just simply vibe code what you want, so which we've been experimenting with. It's pretty cool. So I think that graphics app really sets Zoom apart right now, and it's still in beta. But I think that I would highly recommend tracking that. That's going to probably be a better solution to pull a lot of those. Obviously, we have Mukana here. I'm trying to figure out how to get Mukana to do some of this, use some of the tools from the graphics app because it's kind of open. It can grab onto data from anywhere. So we may end up using Zoom's stuff for our data. I think one of the big things that the advantages of having something that's completely separate is that it's, we can use it in a lot of different places. So if you're just doing a YouTube event, not a Zoom event, you can still have a tool that you can use for that. So those are the kind of things that we like to use with the tool that we have. But the Zoom graphics tools, as they tie into the data pipelines that Zoom already provides, it's pretty powerful. Next question.
Jack Cannon's back from Phoenix, Arizona with this one. I'm pitching a project with a lot of action cameras coming up this fall. What are your favorite action cameras that would be appropriate in an off-road show? We use Sony FX6s for most important shots, but we need 12 cams for off-roading adventures. Suggestions?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, you don't mention, Jack, if this is like for a live broadcast or if this is for like a recorded show that will go through post later on. On the higher end of things, Sony is very popular when it comes to what are called POV cameras. They have the HDC P50, which is pretty popular in sporting events nowadays. If you need something a bit more affordable and perhaps a little smaller, Marshall Electronics also has a bunch of nice little cameras, little box cameras that you can mount, and including lipstick cameras as well, which are really tiny and you can mount. Are pretty flexible in where you can mount them. Another option is Lumens. They also have a bunch of box cameras, little small cameras, although image quality-wise, I'd rather go with the Marshall compared to Lumens. But if this is content that will be posted later on, then in terms of the action cameras that are out there, I would go with, tried and true GoPros. They have the ability. There is the ability to attach timecode boxes to them, which makes, if you're dealing with how many cameras here, 12 cameras plus your multiple FX6s, you want time-coded footage all across the board. So GoPro is really the only choice when it comes to work like that.
Yeah, and I probably have 20 GoPros in my garage, different versions from 2 to I think there was I think at 7 or so we had some heat issues that had us stop using them. So that became kind of the end of the road for us on GoPros, just because. And I think they made it better, but once you get out of a habit, you kind of get into other things. The other ones that we've seen in some of the productions here have been the Sony the RX Zeros. These are here. Let me pull this over here. These are ones that we've seen people. I haven't used them, but we've seen a lot of people use these. These are little Sonys here, and they have they're kind of built around that kind of small, compact view. The ones that we use a lot for small cameras, they're not necessarily action cameras, but when we need to put them in closed spaces, are these Blackmagic. I think at one point I had probably 20 of these by itself, of just sticking them in lots of little places because I can remote control them. You can actually control them with a car controller, like remote control car controller. You can connect all the things to it, and so it was pretty useful for us there. Also, we're starting to see more people subscribe. No, not subscribe. These Osmos are starting to come from DJI, so we're starting to see more of those as well. So those are some of the things that we've seen in the productions that we've been working on. Next question.
Mike Beardmore in Bradford in the UK says, any guidance regarding a network-attached storage system for a small office?
Go, Jeff.
Yeah, the simplest way to start, I would say, is if you haven't already, check out Synology. That's your first stopping point. Again, like we often say, it depends. There's so many variables in terms of what you need it for. Is it just backup? Is it backing up all of the computers on the network? Are you using it for real-time use? Are you doing editing? Then it becomes, very different. A lot of them have faster connections now, up to 10 gigabit, but it depends on everything being able to take advantage of that. So your network, your routers, the machines talking to it, of course, but that's one way to future-proof. In your buying, you need to think about the configuration, how many drives you want, what kind of fault tolerance you're willing to deal with. So that's the first couple things. Those are some of the just core things you need to narrow down. And if I'm not mistaken, they do have a decent kind of help me choose that'll kind of walk you through some of that, if I'm not mistaken. So, but you need to kind of think through those things to then think about narrow down your choices.
Good, Mickey.
Yeah, definitely. Like for a small office, as a starting point, I agree that I would recommend Synology. They have NASs that are really, really affordable compared to more enterprise grade solutions. And as Jeff Cohen mentioned earlier, there are a lot of variables when it comes to any data storage solution. So take in mind how much, of course, how much capacity you require, and also how much throughput you need. You need to do the math. Say, if you're just, storing documents in Excel spreadsheets, and you would require less throughput in both your drive speeds and your network infrastructure compared to someone that, say, might be editing 4K RE raw footage directly off of the NAS, which I've set up people with that as well, and it's certainly possible with the higher end Synology products. So take those variables into account, do the math, and get what you require. And just a reminder that a NAS or a RAID array is not a backup solution, even though you may have a drive failure tolerance, be it one drive or two drives with, like, say, Synology Hybrid RAID or RAID 5 or RAID 10. Just having that failure tolerance is not a backup.
Yeah, and I've used a lot of Synologies, again, as Mickey said, for office stuff and for basic moving things around. That's been really successful for us. For some of the more entertainment-driven things that we've done, we've leaned pretty heavily on things like Jellyfish. So this is OWC. This was, and we've put the Jellyfish raids through pretty intense experiences. So we have, we'll have 20 sources coming into it, 20 editors, pulling stuff around. Now that took us, weeks of fiber processing to make that all work. It's not something you just like, I'm going to plug this in. So it mattered. The switches mattered. Everything else mattered to get that working. But for fast turns, it's been pretty successful for us to go down that path. Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, certainly Jellyfish is an option if you need more throughput for media production duties. Although their OS is quite limited in terms of what it's capable of doing. If you want to have a lot more capability and also possibly more throughput, I would probably look at building a NAS system off of, say, a Supermicro chassis or bare bones system, that come with a server grade motherboard in it, and you can build it up from there, or you can also build it from scratch with a drive chassis from the likes of InWin, and you can build it either with spinning drives, multiple spinning drives, or you can also build an all-flash storage array if you really need fast speeds. Another solution is to buy a pre-made system from the likes of 45 Drives, and those systems can come fully pre-configured, and would their higher end systems are way more capable and way more performant than something like a jellyfish.
Go ahead, Jeff.
And one thing I want to point out that Mickey made a good point that it's not a complete backup solution. However, one little trick, if you're using Macs, for example, is you can set each workstation to use the NAS for Time Machine, and likewise with Windows backup. And then one other thing I'll point out, and they're all kind of doing this, but particularly I think Synology may have been one of the first, which is they, especially for business use, they have this whole Synology cloud where you can run, what they call private cloud. So in other words, just like Google Docs and everything, you can use their system, their software on every machine, even remotely, depending on how you configure it, but using all of your data on your NAS, not someone else's cloud.
Next question.
My favorite of today, Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas, asks, if you had to mic a squirrel, what's your go-to setup for clarity? And he's got a link there.
Go ahead, Chris.
Say I'd customize a lav, a little bit of gaff tape, and good gloves because he's going to bite.
Does gaff tape work on fur? Just wondering.
No, it works on itself. So once you get you can just
wrap
keep on.
him.
There you go. No, I would say the biggest question is how are you going to get a squirrel to stay in a spot, right? So find the food that the squirrel really likes and aim some kind of shotgun mic. And if you're hungry, maybe just a shotgun. I don't know.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I think it depends on what the purpose actually is. Is this for just nature recording for people who are maybe a conservationist or whatever, or is this for FX gathering for say a film or some other entertainment project? If this is for FX gathering, I'd probably go with what is typically the standard mics that you would find when people go out for FX gathering, which are the Sennheiser 416 or the Neumann 81i, or the 82i, which is a longer, tighter pickup pattern version of the 81i. If this is for nature gathering, you may want to have something with a tighter pickup pattern, say a Neumann 82i, the longer version, or even the Sennheiser 816, if you can find one still available, or even a Sennheiser MKH-8070, which is another long shotgun microphone.
The squirrels in Boston Commons will come right up to you if you give them some nuts. So they are very well trained. They'll come up and say hi. They'll wander around you. They sometimes get a little aggressive about those nuts if they see them. But they're very interested in it. I would be also interested in the mic that I really want to get just to test for a lot of these different things is the Sanken CO100K because it's got a much wider range to grab onto things. Some of the examples that I've seen have been pretty impressive. So that'd be the other one that I would think about adding to the mic list because who knows what's going on above 20K. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, the good news is Andy Anatko has done this a number of times. So not just on YouTube, which I'm showing now, but just do a search for Andy Anatko squirrel, and you'll have lots of things to pick from.
There you go. Next, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, just wanted to add, if this is for, say, entertainment purposes, for say for FX for film, differentiate between the sound that a squirrel actually makes, say their vocalizations, versus the sounds of them interacting with things. Say if you need them say their footsteps running around, or their them say eating a nut, you can make those sounds out of using other props in your Foley stage. That way you don't have to deal with a squirrel, an animal artist, and just work with an actual Foley artist who can do everything to sync to picture. Although some Foley artists are like animals as well. So yeah.
All I can say is that when I realized watching someone in a Foley stage, when I realized that celery sounds a lot like breaking bones.
Broken bones.
Yeah, it was like watching them do it. I was just like, oh, and like every sound that you hear now, you're like, oh, that's where that came from. Next question.
Irina Dapapopoulos in Situate says, who is buying Massey's NHT M100 sets online? Are these a good deal or just more vintage stuff to fill space while we keep using the newer, better things?
I'm going to vote more vintage stuff that takes up space. I'm not really into buying old speakers. Like technology's moved a lot since they made those speakers, and so I'd probably stick with newer ones. Genelex. Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana is up next. How do you determine the crossover frequency when setting up subs? Should it always be based on the speaker builder's specs?
Go ahead, Chris.
All right. This is a huge loaded thing that a lot of people have issues with. And it really, really just depends. So for me, I'm a huge fan. If you are putting one, I don't know if this is like a live application or a studio application. A lot of people will get expensive like mains, be it live or in a studio, and then they get a cheap sub, right? And they're like, hey, it's just bass. I'm gonna kind of pepper in this sub a little, and that's fine. For me, I actually moved away from a sub. In the studio, and I use PMC 6.2s, which just go incredibly low, and everything is really, really phase aligned for me. So the thing about subs is what you're hearing actually correct? Okay, and this is where you need to know what you're listening for before you can actually really approach the application, because it's so easy for it to be wrong, and then everything you're hearing, this is what you're making all of your choices on. There's nothing more important than your monitoring. So I would say one, definitely look at the manufacturer's specs. A lot of these speakers are actually made to go to a certain point, and then the sub carries on. I mixed for the last 15 years on a D&B rig, Audio Technique, and it was pretty plug and play. There was a little bit of tweaking, and so a lot of folks will give you basic kind of start points, but then you go into the room and you listen, and you need to know what you are listening for. So this is where this phasing and all kinds of stuff. Anybody who's messing with subs in your little studio, a great way to do it actually is to get your sub kind of right on the back wall. And actually, you can frequently have the port actually facing the back wall. And just open up a signal generator, okay? If your sub is like, let's say it's 85 and down, right? You can actually if you open up a signal generator in Pro Tools and highlight it, the arrow keys will go up frequencies. And you can literally sit there and just click through frequencies one at a time and hear, oh, wow, when I got to 68 hertz, it got really quiet. You have a null there. Okay, there's some kind of reflection, there's some kind of issue there at that point, and that's when higher level subs will have crossover issues, right? Hey, do you want to flip this 180? Do you want to, whatever? And that's when you start looking at dip switches in the actual units themselves. In a live application, typically people are coming out with like a smart rig, and they're doing there is just a ton of different variables in this. But the real thing is, if you don't know what you're listening for, then hire someone who does, because it's the only way to do it. Have it be correct. The most important thing is to learn what it sounds like when it's correct if you don't know. So,
Good, Mickey.
Yeah, if you're sticking to the same family of loudspeaker systems, be it for studio or for PA, you can pretty much trust that the specs and the guidelines from the manufacturer in terms of their crossover frequencies will work for you, because they're in the same family. They're really, those subwoofers and those mains are really designed to work together. But say in a situation you may be mixing and matching mains and subwoofers from different manufacturers, or even from the same manufacturer but different families, you can use their frequency response specifications as a starting point, but the only way to really dial in a good calibrated system is by using an RTA, a real-time analyzer. There are ones that are handheld. Chris earlier mentioned Smart, which is a good measurement tool. There are also free solutions such as an Open Sound Meter that you could use for that. It's very, very similar to Smart, but you can only really calibrate between different families and find the perfect crossover point with an RTA. A simple SPL meter would not be able to get you there.
Next question.
Harshit Trivedi in Daytona Beach, Florida, and on our panel today. What are your thoughts about the Beyer Dynamics being acquired by Cosonic?
Good, Chris.
This is the first time hearing about it. I don't really follow that stuff that much. I love Beyer Dynamic. They make amazing products, and I hope that Cosonic keeps everything exactly how it is, because it's really an absolute staple in production. I mean, they make very, very unique sounding microphones that are just kind of tanks, and they just keep on working, and they are amazing. So,
next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas is back with this. Micpedia is talking about shootouts, quote, close quote. In your opinion, what do they mean by this? And can you guess which is the AKG C12 and which is the Neumann U67? And he's got a link to Micpedia there.
Mickey?
Yeah, when people say shootouts when it comes to like comparing different products, it usually means a direct quite in-depth and direct comparison between them. Say if you with a microphone shootout, you would have multiple microphones recording the same sound source at the same time with a similar distance and similar mic position, so that people can switch and A/B through the different mics and compare them directly with each other, not having to, and they would be listening to the same source. That allows you to be able to really do a fair and proper comparison, instead of, say, like listening to a microphone that was recorded by someone else in a different space using a different signal chain, to another one that has a different, totally different variables and environments around it. In terms of the C12 and the U67, I think those two mics have a very different frequency response and sound signature that when someone has learned what U67 sounds like and a C12 sounds like, yeah, even the layman would be able to tell the difference there. And you can, for certain, like between these two microphones, the detail and the Neumann would really stand out.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, a shootout is just a comparison, right? And I mean, for me, those two microphones are some of my favorites. They're both incredibly detailed. The C12 is just like this angelic top end, and you're going to get a much more robust, like, just dimensional mid-range out of the U67. It just depends on what the sound source is. My buddy uses U67 vintage ones on his toms on a drum kit. You know what I mean? These mics are like, $12,000 a pop or something like that. It's like, don't hit it. So it just depends on what the application is. But the idea of shootouts and all that, to me, it's kind of arbitrary, because it all depends on the actual sound source. So watching someone do a bunch of shootouts on a thing, I mean, like, that's fine. The real thing is if you're in the studio, get dirty with it. I mean, like, fire up microphones and have your singer go and talk into them. Something is gonna be the best thing, and then you use that thing. Don't overthink it. It might not be the $10,000 mic, right? It might be a $300 mic. It just depends. It really, really just depends. But again, it's understanding what the end outcome is when you go into this. That's the thing, that's your compass. That's the North Star. Otherwise, you're just swimming around in stuff that you don't know what it is.
There go, Jeff.
Yeah, Booth Junkie on YouTube. Now it's focused primarily on voiceover, but he does a great job, and he does a lot of this. And to Mickey's point, he does. You can't get any more absolute unbiased. He's, as if you could see the video, he puts the two microphones right in front of him. He has them going into the same interface. And what I love is as he's talking, he literally starts A-Bing, and you can see he puts on screen, he shows you at any given moment which mic you're hearing. And he has a whole bunch of these. This one, for instance, he's comparing the Deity the 416. Here's another one where he's comparing the RE320 to the Heil. And so again, great comparison. And he does some funny ones where he'll take, that $1,500 microphone and compare it to the, $70 copy of it. So also to Chris's point, absolutely, it depends, and especially when we're talking about voiceover dialogue, singing, the person, it could be different. Now, you'll get some characteristic traits, which is good. You can hear the comparison, and you'll see this one really favors the high end, the low end, et cetera. But ultimately, you still do need to try it for yourself or your particular needs.
Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
And definitely, like say for us, like in every single one of our recording booths, where we mostly record voiceover, every single one of them has a U87, AKG 414, similar to what I'm speaking into right now, and an Audio-Technica 4050, and that's a range of like a multi-$1,000 microphone to sub $1,000 microphone. We always have those up on stands because different voice sounds and also different projects require different frequency response for the voiceover recording. And so pretty much on, every time we have a recording session, we sort of do a shootout, either in our minds as, experienced engineers knowing how these microphones sound, and also like doing actual like quick like 5-minute run through all three microphones so that we can decide on which of those mics that we have on the stands ready to go, that we will actually do the recording with.
Go ahead, Chris. Oh, you're back.
Sorry, just to add on to my previous comment, just also anyone who is doing shootouts and you're looking at all these different microphones, remember that once the main thing that matters here is that you get something that's not going to bottom out from the content that's going into it, right? You're doing a truss fall into that mic. You want to make sure that it's not breaking up. You want to make sure that the preamp or interface following it is not breaking up. After that, we got EQ, we got compression. I don't even think about this stuff. Really, I get so much stuff sent to me. I don't care what mic it was done on. If there's a problem, I call the artist. But I have EQ, I have all these tools, and if something's a little more mid-rangey, then that's where I'm cleaning. But it's just about being open to like what a properly captured sound source is. I mean, that's the main thing. And then it's all malleable. So don't overthink it too much, because there's a huge amount of tools that are just like accessible after capture, right? You want to make sure that these few things don't happen, introducing artifacts or anything like that, and then you're pretty solid. And if you don't know, get an SM7. It was Michael Jackson's favorite microphone, and probably no one is, whatever you're working on, is as good as Thriller. So if it worked for him, that's not going to be the problem if you have an issue. It's really a great choice. So.
Yeah, I mean, most studios I walk into, I'm sure like Chris's and Mickey's, there's a closet somewhere that has like 40, 50 mics, and that's because they all are different. I think that it's hard when you see shootouts because it's one person in one space with one, and I think about doing shootouts, but I'm like, well, I need my voice, I need a woman's voice, I need a child's voice, I need I need all these different voices, because each one of those mics, we definitely lean towards different mics for different people. If a woman has a nasally voice or a deep voice, or a man has a different voice, there's a whole bunch of different mics that we're going to use in a live environment. And of course we can make adjustments, as Chris said, to EQ and everything else. But if we can get rid of most of that damage ahead of time, it just means that we can lighter touch, and the less we touch it, the more pristine it feels, the more authentic it feels. I find when it doesn't feel like it's being over processed. As every time we, it's one of those things that, yes, in visual effects, in video, in audio, all these things, we have tons of tools that can make it better. But the less we touch it, there's something organically real to it that we slowly take away as we clean it up. Mickey, last word.
Yeah, and with regards to that, from my point of view, if I can get like 90% to the type of sound that I want just by picking the correct mic, then I'd rather do that than spend more time down the line on EQ. When it comes to the microphone choice as well, if I know, if I'm doing the mix down the line and I know what the final mix will sound like, if this is going to be, for example, a really sound designy kind of piece wherein there's a lot of low end in the sound design or in the music or in the score, then I know already in my head that okay, I might want my VO to sound maybe a little crisper, a little brighter, so that it um shines away on top of the like really rumbly, low endy kind of sound design. So keeping your end goal in mind should also guide you in terms of how you want your say your other elements to sound, like say how you want your VO to sound.
Last question.
Last question comes from Paul Johnson in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. What does the panel think is the best AI engine, such as ChatGPT, to assist with AV and IT troubleshooting? Is one better than another?
Good, Chris.
All right, just very quickly, I would say use the manual. Do not rely on these crutches, okay? You probably don't have that much gear in your setup. Learn what each piece does. It's just, this is the only way, guys. If you are relying on crutches, like, you're already doing a huge disservice to everything. If you're just trying to get past or over a hump that's highly technical, like, you're not going to get this correct. So learn your stuff. Yeah.
Go ahead, Harshit.
So as experience, I recently used Gemini to get through OBS, and I let it know that I use a screen reader called JAWS. So it gave me ample amount of information about my screen reader to use with my AV production tools. So I actually give Gemini the leg up on this one. And if I needed to share or contribute with share with other people, let's just put it that way, I could share links of what I was looking for. So I could actually get tuned in with all my AV and IT work. So I go Gemini.
I have to say that for me, I don't even call ChatGPT anymore or Chat. I just call it Janet from The Good Place. So I go, hey, Janet. And I hold down a button and literally it's a Siri command now where I just go, hey, Janet. And I go, I don't understand why this isn't like, what does this button do? And I have to admit that I was working with I was in a theater and I was like, hey, Janet, I got a CP950. I didn't even tell it what it was. I got a CP950 and I got a large dial on the left. Does that do the speakers in the room or the speakers here? I just couldn't remember off the top of my head. And of course, Janet came right back. But I do it like I told it I had my disposal isn't working. Is there a button somewhere I can plug to reset it? I pointed it and took a picture of a high water pressure thing and just said, this isn't starting. Why? And immediately came back. Did you use old gas? And I was like, yes. So I will admit that I read a lot of manuals. I watch a lot of YouTube about the things that I'm doing. I'm constantly absorbing information. When I'm in the middle of it, like I'm learning Blender right now, I literally just take pictures of things and say, how do I model this? And it just get the step by step from ChatGPT. And I do agree with Chris that you should be reading the manuals, and you should be, by the way, if you take the Sound Devices Scorpio manual and you throw it into a Notebook LM, it creates a hilarious podcast about the Scorpio. This is some crazy stuff, and so anyway, so I use it, but I will say that it's become this extra brain. The acceleration that ChatGPT has had on my ability to absorb information and learn things is, we used to joke that I almost started a company called B212, B212 Media, and I wasn't the first one to think of that. That's from The Matrix, where Trinity pops up and she goes, Tank, I need a program for a B212 helicopter. And so a lot of us talk about B212 training as a that's what you're trying to get to, is that you can just absorb it that fast. And I will say that for me, ChatGPT, I use Claude for programming, Midjourney for images. I'm starting to use VO3 for video, as well as Luma. So I'm using lots of these other things. For me, just the general Q&A every day, all day, and I would say I use it a couple times an hour, is ChatGPT. And I'm just constantly asking it questions about things that I'm thinking about. It's not always accurate. You have to kind of go, okay, well, now I'm going to do some more research in this area. But I will say it's more accurate than almost everything else on the web. Like when you do a search for the best of this, or how do I choose this, the amount of garbage on the web that is just, people just talking out of the wrong end, it's just garbage, and so you have to, if you're going to, I find that ChatGPT is at least as accurate as my first Google search. And it's way more condensed. So anyway, that would be my recommendation. Thank you very much. Thanks to everyone who asked all the great questions that kept us rolling through this whole hour. Every day we get up here and I go, I don't know if today we're going to make it through the whole hour. We somehow do, almost every single time. We ran a little over, and that's what happens. We started with, there's not that many questions. This will be a short day. Never is. So thanks so much to the producers for asking all those great questions, and thanks to the incredible panel that we have here. We can't do this without you. It's so good. So good to have Chris back from a long hiatus. Thanks, Chris, for coming in, and thanks to everyone else on the panel that's here every Wednesday. This is a great audio day, so if you have questions about audio, we often have great experts here to answer those questions, so keep them coming. And thanks to the great team on the back end who makes this possible. There's a small village that gets up every single day, 7 days a week, since March 25th, 2020. We haven't missed a single day because of the incredible community that makes this show possible. Today, if we had done this in person, the Tall Traversal, we would have traveled 47,000 miles. That's 75,000 kilometers, and that is 368 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and back to After Hours.
So I nominate How to Mic a Squirrel as episode title. I think in the chat it has the most interactivity of any of the questions.
There's going to be, I think there's going to be, I'm going to have to, I think I have to do its own thumbnail. I've been trying to get to a point where I start doing thumbnails for each one of these, but this one's going to have to be. Sorry, there's a Midjourney image coming for this one, so if you guys come back later, you're going to see a
Andy has some great photos. I'll bet he'd give permission to use.
Exactly. All right. See you, buddy.